Welcome to The Right Focus, a podcast for writers, newbies, and veterans, and everyone in between. We're hosted by Emma Lee with the assistance of Remy Black and Edie Rooms, all from Writers Inc. Books. Our focus is productivity, process, craft, and tools. Each episode lasts as long as it takes to fix a quick dinner, drive a short commute, or take a brisk walk. Resources and links are in the show notes. Visit us at therightfocus.blogspot.com. Now, on to this week's episode. Welcome to our second episode for Fall into Poetry with a poet. Our poet this time is Pam Ebel, and this makes her third appearance on the podcast. Pam is a pure writer, which in my opinion means she writes many different styles and she shares her knowledge freely with other writers, with us here who are listening on the podcast, with writers who are at local seminars, with writers at national conferences. This year, she's one of the keynote speakers at the Killer Nashville Awards banquet. In our wide-ranging conversation, Pam talks specifically about poetry as performance and immediate audience interconnection, which guides a writer as they place words on the page. While some poems are not suitable for performance, other poems lend themselves naturally to that combination art of poetry performance. Pam covers many topics in our scant time. Here's the interview. How are you doing this morning, Pam?
I am doing well. How about you?
Doing very well. A little stressed because I have 3 interviews today. I'm trying to be calm. I shall be
Yes.
calm.
To be calm. Yeah, yes. Yeah, no, I'm doing well, and I have been following all of your work, which you keep very busy with your particular favorite thing, interviews and finding out what makes writers tick.
Yes.
So
Yeah, it's been fascinating.
everybody
And I
has a
have
different approach.
everybody I have run into has been absolutely wonderful and so kind and so willing to help and share their knowledge on with other people. And I think that is writers. We do have a bit of self-interest that drives us, but we also want to help other people as well. And I
Right.
and I just love that about our community. Now, are you
Yeah.
going to Killer Nashville?
Yes, I am. I am going, I'll get there on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm on a panel on Thursday,
Mm-hmm.
panel on Friday, and a panel on, a panel on Friday, a panel on Saturday, and one on Sunday morning before we get back in the car and head back to New Orleans because we drive up there. So yes, I'll be there. In fact, I'm giving one of the keynote addresses at the awards dinner. There will
Oh,
be
that would be
several of us.
wonderful.
Right. I'm looking forward to it, and I appreciated the invitation. So,
Mm-hmm. I wish
yeah,
Killer Nashville offered an opportunity for people to live stream into some of the panels and for the awards dinner and that kind of thing. Just here's a reduced cost, connect in, buy a
yeah.
ticket for these things, and I would be happy to do that kind of thing because I cannot get away this year at all for it. I tried and tried to schedule it, and it was just like, no, you have to do this, and you have to do this, and and I just can't handle that kind of thing at all.
Well, and a lot of people are not into traveling,
Mm-hmm.
period, any longer
Yes.
with any number of reasons for it. And I think that, have you mentioned that to Clay by any chance?
No, I haven't. I need to do that. I need to mention
Yes,
it
why don't you
soon.
mention that to Clay? Because that would certainly, number one, increase his income stream
Yes, yes,
for the programs and open up perhaps a whole new line of individuals that
right.
would like to participate in the activities that are ongoing through the year.
Yeah. And I love, when I went last year, I took a day and went early, and it was just so nice to arrive and then know that there was no pressure the next day. And then I stayed until Monday and left on Monday. So I felt I just did like a relaxing vacation writer retreat kind of thing. And so that
Yeah.
was really nice. And I think some people go and all they do is they network and they, try to take in as much information as they can. And they get home and they're more stressed than they
Right.
were when they got there. And I'm hunting non-stress things lately.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't go to I mean, there are so many panels anyway, and I pick those that are of immediate interest to me.
Hmm.
In other words, there's a topic that's popped up that I want to know more about, or particularly if I'm planning to discuss it in some other forum. But other than that, I mean, Rick drives me up there. He uses the time while I'm wandering around doing whatever to read himself. He doesn't do a
Hmm.
lot of that at home, and he sleeps. He rests from his busy schedule, and so I take off and we roam around and do things together.
Hmm.
Plus, we have his one of his nephews and family lives in Nashville,
Right.
so we always try to get some visit time with them in as well.
Yeah. Which was always wonderful to be with family. Um,
Yeah, then of course, right after we come back from Nashville, I'm also VoucherCon is here in New Orleans,
right.
and it starts. I think there's not quite a week in between the point in time when we return from Nashville, and then I'm back downtown at the Marriott for four
Right.
days with VoucherCon. So, and then after that, I promised Rick no more conferences for the year, no more racing around, you know, just be me doing my own personal stuff and spending more time with him. And well, we'll be in the holiday seasons.
Well, and if you're like me, the holiday seasons start at the tail end of October and then they run nonstop until well after New Year's Day. Um, and
Well,
so,
we finished New Year's. We're just getting started. Then
right.
we're right into Carnival.
Yes, yes. And that continues on to Lent. And oh my goodness.
Right, right. And then there's just one. Then there's French Quarter Fest, and then there's Jazz Fest, and then there's the summer festival season.
Hmm.
So down here, it never stops. It never stops. But
Right.
I'm trying, like you, to take a little more time and spend it with family and
Hmm.
friends. Um, there's there are no pockets in the shroud, and so we we have to. You can't take it with you, and consequently, those really important opportunities to be with our family and friends is, I think, underrated by a lot of people. We get caught up in the rat race of doing whatever it is we're currently into career wise. We spend a lot of time worrying. And in fact, this topic, one of the reasons when I saw your call that I thought about, I almost didn't respond because
Hmm.
I've done a lot of these for you. And I figured you had plenty of people who wanted to do a presentation. But the thing that caught me on this one was the nature of how, when you first start not just writing, but attempting to share that writing with the world through submission processes. The
Right.
6 years that I have been doing this since COVID started, where I
Hmm.
really sat down and said, I had plenty of stories. What do I do with them? I took, I'm sure you do the same thing. That's how I met you at Killer
Hmm.
Nashville
Right.
3 years ago now. We go and we take all of these courses, and there's all of this information. And when you're new to not writing per se, but writing to get published, that's a whole nother thing than
Yes.
writing.
Yes.
We try to take it all in, and I did like most people. Whoever said whatever, I'd assumed that that was the rule, the only way. And after about 4 years, I thought, now, wait a minute. This is your fifth career. You spent 50 some years doing four other things.
Yeah.
And one thing you did learn was there are no rules.
Right.
They're a constant state of fluctuation. So when I saw that, this business with the poems and prose ideas, I thought I would just like to spend a little time noting once again that there are no black and white rules
Right.
to what we do, and that these two forms open up a variety of approaches we can use.
Yes.
It's important to know we're not stuck in the square peg in the round hole or forced down someone else's rabbit hole. I'm off my soapbox.
So how did you get into writing poetry originally?
Well, poetry, I'm like everybody else I've ever heard you interview or gives a presentation somewhere. Most of us have been writing since we knew how to write.
Yes.
And for myself, for my first 5 years of my life, my mom and I lived with her parents, my grandparents. So when Mama was at work, I was with Mimi and Papa, and he had a gas station. And so we would go at 4:30 in the morning, and I would spend my days at the gas station. I still love the smell of oil and tires and all of that. But the other thing was my grandmother worked with me, and she taught me. I was reading by the time I was 3.
Yes.
And then I was writing, and she encouraged me to write whatever. So and she read poems to me and short stories. And that's just what I assumed you were supposed to be doing with your time. And on the other hand, my generation, and that at 78, I am in a different generation from those who, let's say, started their schooling in the 60s and 70s, and certainly the modern times here. We read and studied both poetry and short stories. It was just part of what we did.
Yes.
The thing that hit me most was about a month ago, I was doing an in-person how to write and market short stories for a local public library. And I had 16 people, way too many people, but we worked through that. And as we got to talking about our work, it finally hit me that poetry, as opposed to traditional prose writing, poetry, for those of us who have done it all our lives, and for me, by my training in bachelor and master's of rhetoric and public address, something that doesn't even exist any longer as far as a study, but it's a performative art.
Yes.
It's a performative art. It is meant to be read aloud.
Yes.
This was the whole idea behind it. And so and then with my profession, my education, and then my teaching and my work, oral interpretation of literature was a strong part of our background, and we performed. I still perform. With short stories and of course novels, not so much any longer.
Right.
Except for those of us that have an opportunity to blend the two. For me, that is the connection, though, between poetry and prose, fiction prose in particular, is that if you think hard enough about what you're doing, you realize one of the things you should work toward is I write asking myself, not is it on shun format and 1-inch margins and show don't tell. I ask myself as I'm writing, what does it sound like when I read it aloud to my audience?
Yes.
And to me, that is a completely different layer of work with your words and your organization of them.
Yes, definitely. And with poetry, you have an immediate feedback. As you're reading your poem to your audience, you're you look up and you see them. You make connection with their eyes. You can see how what you're saying is having an impact on them. And you don't get that when with short stories and novels at all. And really, if you're performing a play, you there's very little of the audience that you see. I know, Shakespeare talked about the fact that the audience breathed and that, it reflected into the actors on the stage and they reacted in that kind of thing. But, you know, the thrust stage of Shakespeare's time where the audience was all around the stage,
Right.
that's totally different from the way that we have stages that are set up today. You're very divorced from the people on the stage, and the people on the stage, they hear reaction of the audience, but they really only see the reaction of the first couple of rows. So
Right.
poetry is definitely an immediate audience reaction, and you can, make changes in the way that you're presenting what your words and that kind of thing. And so I think poetry is creates an immediacy. Do you see that translating into the way that you write short stories? Do you see that desire to create that immediacy on the page?
I make no distinction between my poetry
Mm-hmm.
and my short story, short fiction, or even my novellas.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, that's what I'm saying. For me, because of the way I have been educated and trained, everything is performative in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So you pantster, plotter, whatever, to me, the most critical thing is sit there and look at it and say, and then read it aloud.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you never get another audience, unfortunately, my family and friends are stuck listening to me because once I get a short story, I read it first to my husband and then I call up three friends and they say, well, when are we supposed to come over and where's the champagne? And and then they listen to it
Mm-hmm.
and they give me critical feedback.
Right.
Some things that I thought made sense, and if they all ask that same question, I have to go back and tinker. But while I'm creating, I don't make a distinction between my poetry and of course now with free verse. When we were growing up, it was da 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 da
Yes.
da. And imagine in the late 50s, and I first heard Howl
Yes.
read by
Mm-hmm.
Allen Ginsberg in the mid 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And that just blew up the concept for most of us in my generation about what poetry was supposed to look and sound like.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, it fit itself more closely with prose, with short stories.
Right.
And that I think opened a lot of doors for a lot of people.
Yes.
But I'm really, and so now with this ongoing class that I have, now it's 20 people I can't get rid of. And I am pushing really hard for them you don't have to write poetry, you don't have to read poetry, but look at your own short stories and ask yourself, what is it going to sound like if the reader hears it? That gives a whole nother level. And then you'll know where to fill in the written page for people who will not get to hear it. But you'll recognize the minute you start reading it, you'll think, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. I've left a word out or I've failed to connect the dots at some point.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you start doing that, then you go back and you layer in those missing pieces. And yesterday, I got so excited about this whole idea. I pulled out my now 65-year-old copy of Aristotle's The Rhetoric and his Poetics.
Right.
And I was reading some of his observations. And this one, Emily, I love. He says, words are like men. We feel a difference between people from afar and our fellow townsmen. So it is with our feelings for language. Hence, it is well to give the ordinary idiom an air of remoteness. The hearers are struck by what is out of the way. In poetry, the language, if it is to be appropriate, must rise and fall with the subject.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same with prose. We're trying to reach people. And so we need to say, the reader, we should look at as somebody who is a townsperson, a family member.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to reach those people. And therefore, what would they hear and what would they think about what they were hearing or reading? And it's a mixture. So for me, it's all, if you look at it as performative,
Mm-hmm.
then I think it adds a layer. And I do the same with my prose. I just have to do that. And as I think a lot of your other people will talk about using poetry, whether you write it in your prose or placing someone else's poems or lines. Well, obviously, first of all, if you're using someone else's work, be sure that it's in the public domain.
Right.
So you
Yes.
don't end up having to pay for it or getting sued for using it.
Mm-hmm.
But for our own works, again, as you put poems in, you need to be sure that there is that interrelationship between the poem itself and the rest of the work. And
Yes.
to me, Louise Penny is one of the best. She created Ruth Sardo in the Gamache series, and Ruth and the duck roam around with the poetry, and
Yes.
that's she does brilliant things with
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah. Now, you've talked about free verse and how that can actually be more performative than highly structured verse. I mean, there are some sonnets that you read and you can follow the argument that's part of the sonnet as it goes through.
Mm-hmm.
But there are others that you read and it's very distant from you and it's hard to follow. And some of Frost's longer blank verse poems, like the one about the out where the boy gets his arm cut off, and the one about the hired man, death of the hired man. Those tell a story, and so you're following along with it. And I love how he structured it. You don't realize he has a structure until you go back and look at it. But there are some free verses that don't work so well, like E. E. Cummings' But. It's like three different conversations going on at the same time because one is spoken, one's mental reaction, and one's actually your heart reaction, and so that's very hard to present as a performance. I do think some of the structured poems, like villanelles, are very good for performance aspect because the villanelle is an extremely haunting form. It's almost an obsessive form. So do you I guess I'm saying is how do you pick what you're going to do in your presentations?
Well, if you're talking about you talk about performance now,
Mm-hmm.
for myself, I pick it. Usually, if you're doing some kind of a performance these days, there's going to have been a theme
Mm-hmm.
most of the time given to you as the reader or speaker. And so you're stuck within whatever that theme was.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, if it's reading our own works, then if I don't have a work that is in that particular genre of poetry, whether it's free verse or but subject matter too,
Mm-hmm.
then I won't do it because I obviously if I haven't written anything in that particular area, it's because I'm not interested in it.
Mm-hmm.
But when I do have an opportunity to share my work, a lot of my current poetry has a Southern bent to it, obviously, from living here now for these many years. So a lot of my themes are Southern in nature, the life in the South, and things that hit home. And there are a number of places where that is what people are interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll select my own works to read. I have not done a lot of performative work of other people's poems
Mm-hmm.
in a while. There's just not a lot of opportunities, at least here. Most people want you to share your own work.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And as far as your question, though, don't ever pick anything. Number one, I don't care if it's your own poetry or someone else's, or you're putting together a speech. Be sure whatever you do, you can pronounce all the words properly in the work, because if you can't, it's going to be a disaster. And
Yes.
most people just see the word on the page and they'll think, oh, well, that's you, blah, blah. And in New Orleans, we have some idioms of our own, like
Mm-hmm.
a number of people here will say horizon.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a while to realize they meant horizon.
Yes.
Now, to New Orleanians, they know exactly what horizon
Mm-hmm.
is, but it took me almost a year of talking and listening to people, and then it hit me what they were doing. So, but there again, whatever you choose to share out loud with
Mm-hmm.
people, be sure that you understand how to pronounce the words, more importantly, what they mean or meant
Mm-hmm.
at the time of the writer's creation. Because if you give a current definitional reading of it based on what we think now, you may just have ruined that particular piece of literature. So you need to know at what point in time, if you mention all of these various poets, they all lived in somewhat different times, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore their works are
Reflective.
obviously correct for their particular times.
Right.
Well, unless you got to Allen Ginsberg.
How do you, well, when I was a teenager, uh, in college and thereafter, I wrote a lot of poetry, but I probably haven't written a poem in 30 years or so because my interest turned toward writing fiction. Um, and then my work demanded a lot of, you know, basic nonfiction writing and presentations and that kind of thing. And so I love reading poetry. I love understanding poetry and seeing the deeper meaning because it does seem to me that poems have that underlayer that fiction sometimes you don't realize it's there, but with poems you read it and then you go back away from it, and then 2 days later going like, oh, there's this extra that's going on. So I'm leading up to ask you, which one do you prefer writing? Do you prefer writing poetry or do you prefer writing your fiction?
Oh, I love them all. It just depends. Some things will come to me and it's it screams the need for a poem. In fact, and I meant to email you, but the last podcast that I did with you, I wanted to apologize after I watched it. That morning, 30 minutes before we went on,
Mhm.
I got the phone call, not unexpected, but that
Mhm.
a friend of 46 years had
I
just died.
remember. Yes. Mhm.
And I was a mess, but I thought I have to go forward with this. And about a month later, the family of this man, they were all over the country, and they
Mhm.
decided that they wanted to have, they had him cremated, but they wanted to have a gathering. And
Mhm.
so guess who got stuck with, with the gathering? And I just, at that point in time, with some time passing, I wrote, "The phone doesn't ring here anymore." And that poem was dedicated to my friend Jim.
Right.
And I read it at the gathering, and everybody just was very, very quiet. And now I get emails from various family members or his friends. And at the end, they always say, and the phone doesn't ring here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So something will push me over the edge and I'll get a poem together. Or I will think that a short story requires a piece of poetry. And I do start a lot of my stories with poems written by others, but that are in the public domain. And because that just strikes me as something that forces the audience, the readers, to think about as I begin to work into my
Right.
writing with them.
And it works in their minds subconsciously as they're going on.
Why was that there? What,
Mm-hmm.
why did they put a piece of poetry there?
My
And
favorite authoress is Mary Stewart, and she
yes,
always had a head note that was a quotation from something. And you wouldn't, as you were reading her chapter, you wouldn't think, oh, I don't know why she put that there. But then after the chapter was over with, you would go back and you would look at that head quotation and you'd go like, oh, that makes total sense now. And so
right.
it was like she was titling her chapters without titling her chapters. Zoom just gave me a notification that we're running out of time. So
Okay.
I, I wanted to ask you, is there anything that you wanted to promote? This will come out in late September. Um,
Not really. I'm working on, I think you know that the Four Pieces of Evidence, my
mhm.
novella that I published last year, and on a whim sent to the Killer Nashville to consider for the Silver Falchion, thinking this is never going to fly. And it didn't for the top 3 award contestants, but I got this message that it was one of the editor's picks in the supernatural category. I didn't know what else to put it in because Madame Pandit is a ghost, as is her BNB Valentino, who wears his smoking jacket. But I am currently writing and hoping to finish the second in the series with the detectives now retired, and they've opened their own detective agency in Hollywood. So, and again, an unfinished murder that the woman went missing now at 70 some years ago, and they never have found her as the actress. So hopefully I'll get that out in time to be published the end of this year.
Right, right.
But
Well,
other than that, I'm just writing to enjoy myself and share it with people.
yes, that's what I do. I just finished a set of 3 novellas, and I, put them out, and very few people will find them, but I just want to share them, put them out there and share them.
Yes.
So, all right. Thank you so much, Pam, for talking with me.
Well,
It's
as
good to see
always,
you.
it's good to see you. And I'm sorry I will not see you in Nashville, but perhaps in the near future
Yes,
somewhere else.
yes, exactly. All
And
right.
good luck
Thank
to
you.
you.
Good luck.
Bye bye.
This concludes our interview with Pam Ebel. Next week is October 1, the first official month of autumn. We have 5 Wednesdays of interviews, then 5 remaining in November and the first week of December. As always, share this episode with other writers. Don't forget to press that like button. And for comments and speculations, use the comments section or pop an email to winkbooks@aol.com. Have a great week. And remember, as always, write on. Thanks for listening to The Right Focus, a podcast for writers at all levels, hosted by Emma Lee from Writers Inc. Books, assisted by Remy Black and Edie Runes. Our focus is productivity, process, craft, and tools. Music is licensed through Audio Jungle, called Background Music Loop. Its creator is Alexander Polishchuk, known on Audio Jungle as Plastic 3. The music comes in different iterations. Show notes and resource links for this and other episodes can be found at therightfocus.blogspot.com. Write to us at winkbooks@aol.com when you have questions, comments, and speculations. We will try to answer you as quickly as possible. By the way, we will not mind your email address. That's rude. If you find value in our content, share with your writing friends or write a review. We're small beans here without the advertising budget of the big peeps, and you can make a difference. And whatever occurs, write on.